Hello everybody, this is Don Shum and I want to welcome you to the Oticon podcast program. In this edition, we're going to talk about how the cognitive system organizes complex sound environments to allow the listener to be able to focus on the talker of interest and suppress other sounds in the environment. Let's get started. When we talk about brain hearing, we talk about how speech understanding is a cognitive process. But the purpose of this podcast is to take a deeper look at exactly what we mean by saying that speech understanding is a cognitive process. In an earlier podcast, I made the point that complex environments are just that. They are complex. There are multiple sources of sounds happening at any given time. And sometimes those sources of sound can be other people talking. What the listener wants to be able to do is to focus in on the talker that is of most interest and be able to suppress the other sounds in the environment, including competing talkers. The first thing that happens when a listener enters a complex sound environment is that the cognitive system attempts to organize that sound environment for the listener. The cognitive system is trying to provide a map of what the various sources of sound in that environment are all about. Very importantly, the cognitive system tries to create meaningful sources of sound, not just an acoustic analysis of the sound that's going on, but to describe the source of those sounds, what's making that sound, because that is what the listener will use to determine whether or not it's something that is worth paying attention to, or is it something that you need to suppress. And it is that assignment of meaning, that assignment of source, that is a very important first step in trying to organize sound environments. Once the sound environment is organized, then the listener can consciously decide what is the most meaningful thing to listen to at that moment in time, and what parts of that sound picture can be ignored for the time being. What we are talking about is selective attention. And that is one of the great skills of the cognitive system, the ability to take in a lot of stimulation that's happening in the environment and allow the person to focus on that subset of that information that is of most interest at that moment in time. To give you a sense of selective attention in action, I'm going to give you a task. I'm about to play a sound sample for you, and in that sound sample there's going to be a male and female, and they're both going to be talking at the same time. What I want you to do is at this moment in time, I want you to decide whether or not you're going to pay attention to the male talker or the female talker. And once you decide which one you want to pay attention to, I want you to try to listen to that talker all throughout the sound sample. And the sound sample is only 10-15 seconds long, but try to lock onto one of the two talkers and follow that talker all the way through the sample. Ready? Let's get started.
While I'm in this meeting, I need you to take care of
but I got tired of sitting in traffic.
I need you to call the Atlanta office and have them fax last week's sales
usually
figures.
saves some time.
Also,
if I'm
copy
lucky,
this memo
I can
and
catch an
distribute it to
express
everyone
train
in
and be in
marketing.
the office by 8:30.
How did it go? Well, if you're like most listeners, it was a difficult task, but it was a doable task. And once you figured out which voice you were listening to and the characteristics of that voice, you probably were able to track the message pretty well throughout the course. Maybe you didn't get every word and every syllable, but you were able to pretty much track the message. Now, in order to show you just how good the cognitive system actually is, I'm going to have you do the task a second time. But this time I want you to switch. If you listen to the female talker the first time, this time I want you to listen to the male talker. And if you listen to the male talker the first time, I want you to listen to the female talker. But again, the task is the same. Decide on which one you need to listen to this time and try to follow that person all the way through the sample. Here we go.
While I'm in this meeting, I need you to take care of
but
a
I got
couple
tired
of
of sitting
things.
in traffic.
I need you to
At
call
least
the
with
Atlanta
train, I
office
can
and
get a
have
little
them
reading
fax last
done.
week's
It
sales
usually
figures.
saves some time.
Also,
if I'm
copy
lucky,
this memo
I can
and
catch an
distribute it to
express
everyone
train
in
and be in
marketing.
the office by 8:30.
Were you able to switch? Most people can. And I want you to stop for a moment and think of what you just did. You had the exact same complex waveform, two different talkers speaking at the same time. The first time through, you were able to suppress one of the talkers and pay attention to the target talker. The second time through, with the exact same complex waveform covering the exact same frequency range, you were able to switch what part of that complex waveform you paid attention to and which part you were able to suppress. That ability of the cognitive system to allow you to selectively attend to one talker compared to the other, in my opinion, is an amazing ability. And it's part of why we talk so much about the cognitive system when we talk about brain hearing. Interestingly, part of the ability to know what to suppress comes in the ability to identify the competition. In other words, when your cognitive system maps out the sound environment, it is assigning meaning to those sources of sound. And even though you're not paying attention to it, if those sound sources have been identified, it's easier for you to suppress. As you know, one of the key effects of sensory neural hearing loss is that the amount of information that is sent to the cognitive system, that neural code that comes up from the periphery, has been corrupted. That is what sensory neural hearing loss does to signals. And when that signal has been corrupted, then the cognitive system is working harder and harder and harder to be able to identify and assign meaning to the sources of sound. Before you can separate out and decide what you want to pay attention to and what you want to ignore, you have to be able to have that organized sound map. When we talk about brain hearing technologies, we're talking about technologies that allow the person to better organize sound. Open Sound Navigator creates a much cleaner sound picture. It preserves clean speech signals at the same time as it suppresses non-speech noises in the environment. The spatial sound system tries to maintain localization cues to the highest degree possible, and that, of course, is going to help in the organizational process. SpeechGuard is designed to preserve as much detail in the speech waveform as possible, because you never know which detail the cognitive system is going to need at any moment in time to be able to identify that particular speech sound as belonging to the talker that they're tracking at that moment in time. At Oticon, we firmly believe that the better we understand the cognitive system, the better able we are to create solutions to allow your patients to perform at the very highest levels in these complex listening environments. As always, if you have any questions or comments, please feel free to contact me. My email is d.shum@oticon.com. Thank you for your time.